next, why don't we have Scott Gibson come up?
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Scott Gibson. I'm with the Regional Transportation of Washoe County. We're an MPO. We're the Metropolitan Planning Organization for our communities in northern Nevada. Our member agencies are the cities of Reno and Sparks and Washoe County. We have in our region, our lane, so we're responsible for the major arterials and what we call the regional roads, and those are identified in our long-range transportation plan. So we have like 3 functions. One of them, again, we're the MPO, so we have a planning organization. We do the long-range transportation plan that makes us eligible for federal pots of money. And then we also run the transit system, the bus system. And then we're unusual in that we also have a highways, street and highway engineering department that's responsible for, we hire the consultants and manage the tax increment that funds reconstruction, rehabilitation, and maintenance on all of the regional roads. And I always say one of the best parts about my job is that I don't own any of the roads, or our agency does not. They all belong to our local agencies, so we finish these projects and then we turn it over to them for regular maintenance and that type of thing. But it's a big collaborative effort. On our board, the city council members and county commissioners sit on our 5-member board and kind of oversee the way we manage funding in our area. So our RTC, in our community, we have about 5,000 lane miles of roads in our jurisdiction between the 3 communities in the urbanized area. Washoe County runs from about Reno is kind of on the south of it, and it runs all the way up to the Oregon border, but we only address the urbanized part of that. We stay out of Gerlach and the Burning Man areas of our community. So we take care of about 1/3 of the highway network, but about half the trips take place on the roads that we manage. The county, our local agencies are responsible for their local roads, which are 2/3 of the pavement, but only carry about 7 of the trips overall. Our funding is pretty robust. We have indexed fuel taxes that we started, that passed twice by voter initiative. The first one was passed in 2004, and this increased the tax on fuel sold in Washoe County and also indexed it to inflation. But the first time around, they indexed it to the consumer price index. And you'll remember in the early 2000s, the consumer price index was pretty flat, but construction inflation was through the roof. And so we put it on the ballot again in 2008 and tied it to the producer price index, which more closely tracks construction inflation. And so that works as well. And WC2 also increased its sales tax, and that's what got us into the preventive maintenance business, to take care of preventive maintenance on the regional roads overall. It's kind of, I have discussions like this all the time on what constitute pavement preservation in our community. And again, this is from the history of how we did this. When we got that maintenance money, our first program was to develop our different manuals and procedures for implementing aspects of our pavement preservation program. And the first one was for doing preventive maintenance. And so that came about in 2004. And again, it used a little bit of a sales tax increment, and generally sales tax pays for our transit system, fuel tax pays for our roads and reconstruction. We've since moved all of that preventive maintenance under the fuel tax mode as well, because our sales tax has been suffering. But again, we count pavement preservation as everything we do on our existing network that isn't new capacity and that type of thing. And so we also we later developed a rehab and reconstruction program, and how we prioritize that and do that project selection. And then also we've developed a corrective maintenance program, which takes care of roads that are too good for rehab reconstruct and too poor for preventive maintenance. And again, you can see the ranges of prices here. You know, the preventive maintenance is an order of magnitude lower than the rehab or even on the corrective maintenance side for the most part. One of the great aspects that have made this program a success is that when we set all these up, all of those manuals, we got buy-in from all of the public works directors of each of our local agencies as well as our own, so everybody really committed to this pavement preservation process. In terms of project selection, it's a pretty simple, straightforward things. All of our agencies run Paver as their pavement management systems and have been doing that for 40 years or so. So they have a lot of history, but our thresholds are anything with a PCI less than 55 as a candidate for rehab or reconstruction, generally below 40s, reconstruction, and we've had a lot of, we've been working through a backlog of kind of structurally inadequate pavements, so we do a lot of full depth reclamation, and we're really getting a lot of our network is now kind of getting up to where we have a lot of meat to work with in terms of our pavement structures. Preventive maintenance is anything 56 or above, but we've been kind of trying to get that more into the 70 and above range and make it really preventive maintenance, and then letting corrective kind of fall between the 70 to 40-ish range, depending on the type of distresses or problems that the road has. And there's different tools in that corrective maintenance toolbox to kind of take care of everything else. Over time, this is the history of our PCIs since we got into the program. You can see here from about when we started implementing it. Our local agencies had been doing some work. We had a mayor in the city of Reno called Pete Sferrazza, who became known as Pothole Pete Sferrazza. And the city got into a budget difficulties, and so they deferred maintenance, of course. Maintenance was the first thing to go. And so they stopped doing any crack sealing and that type of thing for 3 or 4 years, and then we had 3 horrible winters in a row, and it just blew the network apart. And that's how come those voter initiatives were successful, because we committed that, you know, if you give the money to the RTC, we're going to fix these roads, and it was really important to our community. And Nevadans aren't known for raising taxes on themselves, but they did that not once but twice, and so that kind of gives you an idea of how bad our roads were. So there was a big hole to dig ourselves out of, and our local agencies had started working on that and using preventive maintenance or preservation concepts, but when the RTC got that funding increment, it really kind of took off. And so from about 2005, we got into, this is on the RTC network, our local network, and we got up as high as about 85 or so around 2015, where our last things we do are collect our data. So as Andrew was talking about, so we have fresh data to make decisions on. None of our data can be more than 3 years old to be eligible for funding in the program. And so that was one of the strong things, but we got up to about 85, and that gave us equity in the system. And then we had a couple major projects, major corridor projects, where we were trying to log in and get some federal FTA money for 2 BRT bus rapid transit corridors. One of them up and down Virginia Street, which is our major north-south corridor, and then on 4th and Prater, the old Highway 40, which is our major east-west corridor. And we stepped out of pavement preservation for 2 years, used that money to leverage a bunch of Tiger grants, and did these $100 million worth of $120 or $40 million worth of work in these corridors that dramatically improved them for transit, pedestrians, bicycles, and all of that type of stuff. But that led to a dip in our PCIs, but again, that's one of the great benefits of managing your system well and having a good pavement preservation in place, is that it gives you opportunities to take advantage of those types of things and leverage other funding to get some major major work done. Our goal in our pavement preservation plan is to maintain a PCI of 80 or above on our network. Also, here's kind of where we stack up relative to a couple to our local agencies. This is the RTC, what we call the Regional Transportation Plan roads. So we got about more than 80% in good condition, 15% in fair, and we have this little 2% backlog, and that's kind of the deterioration that we get every year. Our annual budget currently is $22.5 million. 6.5 of that goes to our preventive maintenance program, and the rest of it is $2 million to corrective. And we also dedicate some funds to collectors and industrial roads whose traffic volumes don't allow them to be considered, so we have to dedicate a little bit of money for that. But essentially now we're in a pretty steady state condition to where we can address this 2%, and as they slide down, we get another 2% the next year and that type of thing. Just in relatively, this is all of our roads regionally, including the local roads, and about 7%, so even our local agencies are in pretty good shape these days. And I always like to compare it to the MTC, our Bay Area colleagues, that MPO over in the Bay Area, who struggle and have quite a bit of a backlog. And so if our roads were in the same relative condition, our backlog would be about 10 times greater than it would be as it is now. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
So do you use the MTC process then for your PCI, the survey? And
no, we don't do street saver. Again, it's all micropaver.
It's micropaver. Okay, I missed that part.
I've tried to get agencies to go to street saver at one time because it's simpler and web-based, and and again, each of our agencies do that, and the way they each give me Excel spreadsheets. They download some certain data, and so I just combine them all and make this big spreadsheet, and that's how we do our prioritization. And then we have a pavement preservation committee that involves the local agency engineers and RTC, and we hammer out the annual program based on those basic concepts of prioritization.
Still, that's a pretty interesting comparison to the Bay Area. You guys are managing your system well, from what it looks like to me.
Yeah, again, the Bay Area has 109 agencies. We have 3, so some of them, yeah, and they have communities with PCIs of 90 and such, but they struggle.
So you just mentioned that some of those others have a PCI of 90. You showed your condition over time, and it had been increasing up there and then dipped down a little at the end. Do you feel like you're now at a status quo level instead of trying to improve condition, or are you still trying to improve condition?
We're pretty much at status quo, and later on I'm going to talk about functional potholes, and we're in a very mature condition, but we're getting to where we've been piling preventive maintenance treatments on roads that are beginning to create some of their own issues. And so there is one data point that isn't included in this graph, and I was heartened to see that this did start to bend back. We had an inflection point and it was starting to flatten out. I was getting a little concerned we were going to keep heading south for a while.
Yeah.
But again, as that dip is, you step out and don't take care of things for a couple years, and it shows up pretty quickly. It's surprising how dramatic that happens.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. Go from there. So as what I was driving at there is, if you had to draw a line on that graph and said that your agency's goal is to maintain a PCI of X,
80.
Then 80 is a good number there. That's a good status quo number that you're at.
Yep, 80 or above is what we're looking for, and I think that's achievable for us. We actually need to start, and again, based on the condition of our network, we are in preventive maintenance mode and keeping good roads good. And I've been talking with Brian about how we need to we've been trying to keep our budget was at $8.5 million a year, and so that 6.5 was based on a third of our budget going to preventive maintenance, and then they increased our budget to 22.5, and I need to bump our preventive maintenance budget up because now we're getting a backlog of good roads that we need to keep good. So, good problem to have. Thanks, folks.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.